All right, good evening, everybody. It is July 20th, 2022. And tonight we are going to be talking about and covering Tesla's earnings report. Yes, that is correct. So big day on Wall Street, obviously Wednesday after the closing bell, which was today. Tesla and Elon Musk reported their Q2 quarterly earnings report, which I actually took a deep dive in it. And before we start, I actually want to give out to everybody the Nightbot command of the investor deck. So if you type !Musk, M-U-S-K, in the chat, the Nightbot will drop the link so you guys could follow along. During tonight's stream, you could actually take a look at the investor deck right along with us as we are talking about some very important specific topics in relation to the earnings report. Now, I think the number one thing that we're going to talk about tonight are margins, okay? So if we really think about the automotive sector in general, I think one of the, I'm not going to say not the only thesis, but I think one of the main theses of a lot of Tesla bulls is that Tesla has been able to maintain really, really good operating margins or gross margins on their EVs, as opposed to some of the margins that you see standard across the industry. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, for example, if you look at a company like GM, if you look at a company like Ford, if you look at a company like Volkswagen, margins are usually around 15 or 12 to 15%. However, Tesla has been consistently posting margins of about 30% or more. Now, one of the concerning things about this earnings report is that automotive gross margins, or their automotive gross margin, actually came in at about 27.9. Now, even though that is good, we are continuously seeing margin compression and decelerating margins. So here's what I mean by that. That is down from about 32.9% last quarter and 28.4% versus a year ago. Now, this isn't exclusive to Tesla, right? So as we've been talking about on the streams, I said that Q2 earnings is going to be absolutely critical, not only for Tesla, but for every single company that is reporting, because Wall Street will be looking for the maintenance of the margins. So our company is able to maintain those really lucrative and really high margins in an environment of record inflation. Now, we just got a CPI print, which is the Consumer Price Index, highest in 40 years of about 9.1%. So a lot of analysts on Wall Street, a lot of investors, the number one thing they are looking towards this earnings season are inflationary pressures impacting the bottom line, inflationary pressures impacting gross margins, higher interest rates impacting margins, and in addition to that, currency and foreign exchange rates affecting profitability and margins. So we'll talk about that tonight. We'll also talk about some news coming out of the Tesla earnings report in relation to their brand new factories in Germany, in Berlin, also the factory in Shanghai. Now, we've been talking about the zero COVID policy when it relates to China quite often on the stream, and I think it's going to come to be of great importance on this stream, because Shanghai is supposed to ramp up production to be one of the most, I would say, profitable and prosperous manufacturing facilities that Tesla has. But I'll actually read, before we start off the stream, I'm actually going to read a statement that came out of the investor deck. So if you guys want to follow along, once again, !Musk, M-U-S-K, in the chat. So I'm pulling this directly off of the investor deck, okay, when it relates to the China factory. And so Tesla says, and I quote, "While the Shanghai factory was shut down fully and then partially for the majority of Q2, we ended the quarter with a record monthly production level. Recent equipment upgrades will enable us to increase our production rate even further." So we've been talking about this, and I've been saying, you know, the zero COVID policy in China is, not only is it horrible for business, but it really makes forecasting business projections nearly impossible, right? So the number one thing that a lot of analysts on Wall Street look for in relation to Tesla are the deliverables and the production numbers for Tesla specifically. So in a place like China, when you have a zero COVID policy and the government could actually knock on your door and force you to shut down operations or partially stall your operations, you know, it's very, very hard to ramp up production to where you need it to be. Now, if you guys remember correctly, Elon Musk said both the factories in Austin, Texas, so the brand new factory in Texas and the brand new factory in Berlin were quote unquote, I think he said something along the lines of gigantic money furnaces. So we'll also talk about some updates on that came from the earnings report, and then do a deep dive into the profitability when we get into the operating income and operating margins. But first, everybody, let's see who we have in the chat. We see RJ, says hola Tom from Colorado. Good to see you, RJ. Sally is here, says hey Tom. The one and only Dante Rose, good to see you. Chris Beeman, hey, we missed you last night. Good to see you, Chris. Hopefully you're feeling well. FredX is here. Solo says, here we go. What's the skinny? Good to see you, Solo. Chad says, yo, good to see you, Chad. William says, I'm unsubscribed. Good to see you, William. Paul says, after work, hangout. Good to see you, Paul. FredX says, needed this one, Tom. Thank you. Good to see you, FredX. The one and only Otto is joining us. Rick Wolf. Welcome, Rick. 61 says, hello, everybody, and hola, Tom. Tucson says, hey, from Tucson. Good to see you. Austin City Limits says, hey, Tom. Sunshine After Rain is here. And I see Sparks Carnival. Good to see you, Otto. Welcome. Yeah, so the topic of tonight's stream, everybody, is going to be exclusively geared towards talking about Tesla's earnings report. And I think it's appropriate to cover Tesla's earnings report today because it is one of the largest companies by market capitalization, which makes up the S&P 500. So why is that important? Well, if you have huge moves, let's say in a stock like Tesla, in a stock like Alphabet, Microsoft, that's probably going to put some pressure either way to the positive or the negative in the major indices. Okay, so I think after the bell, after Tesla reported their earnings report, I think the stock is about flat after hours. It was briefly up about 3%, but I think it has come back down to trading around flat. So check out these guys. Reminds me of being back in New York City, guys. Very lively night tonight in downtown Miami. You know, I think we're going to take a quick walk over to the FTX Arena. We haven't been there in a while, so we'll do that. Hey, Mike Skate TV, what's up? Good to see you. Sparks Carnival says, Tom, Tesla sold about 75% of its Bitcoin holdings. Yeah, they did. I don't think that... you know, and it's funny, so that got the majority of the headline, right? So the majority of the headline when Tesla reported earnings was all in relation to that they sold about 75% of their Bitcoin. But I think that's just so insignificant to the actual report. Now, I understand why the media wants to hammer on that, right? Because, you know, the crypto craze and Bitcoin, but in terms of the overall fundamentals of the company, I'm not of any significance to Tesla in particular, in my opinion. Dusty Cole is here, says, welcome to the Thunderdome. Good to see you. FredX, good to see you. Maurice is here. Palmer, welcome, Maurice Palmer. Gregory is joining us. The one and only Sunshine After Rain. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you're well. It's a beautiful day, beautiful night out here in downtown Miami. Jay is here. Hey, the ABX girl says, hey, Tom, also the US dollar has strong spending power versus the EU now. Yeah, you're 100% right. ABX girl, you're 100% right. Irish Lou says, good evening, Tom. Good evening, everybody. Welcome. Daryl says, hey, Tom. Good to see you. Daryl, welcome. Sheila Neal is here. Welcome. Yeah, so to piggyback off of what the ABX girl is saying, and I think it's very relevant to talk about that because today in Tesla's earnings report, and once again, everybody, I know people are just starting to flood in here, so if you actually type !Musk, M-U-S-K, in the chat, I was able to find the original copy of the Tesla investor deck for this quarter's earnings report. So if you guys want to pull that up and just follow along or just keep it for your records, that's the really hardcore concrete data there. So you can see the balance sheet, you can see the cash flow statement, everything like that, and also some of the verbiage that the team at Tesla is communicating to the field. So if we just want to jump right in, so in terms of earnings per share or EPS, ticker symbol TSLA or Tesla reported about $2.27 of EPS versus $1.81 expected. So there was a little bit of a beat on the bottom line there. Now, they did miss on the revenue piece. So revenue did actually come in a little bit less than expected. Tesla posted about $16.93 billion worth of revenue. Many analysts on Wall Street, or the consensus, was about $17.1 billion. Okay, about $17.1 billion. And if you guys actually look in the investor deck, so the Tesla investor deck that I put in the Nightbot, if you scroll down to profitability and operating income, one of the things, usually companies will give the positives and the negative of what actually impacted operating income, profitability for the business. And this quarter, to piggyback off of what the ABX girl was saying, one of the major negatives this quarter was the foreign exchange impact. Now, obviously, this is not exclusive to Tesla. We have many other CEOs of big publicly traded companies coming out here and saying that if you run a company or a multinational company and you have a lot of your business predicated in a lot of your sales in foreign currency, and when the US dollar is extremely, extremely strong, when you go to convert, there's a lot of dirt bikes out tonight. It sounds like a dirt bike rally tonight. But when you go to convert that foreign currency back into US dollars, you're obviously going to be getting a lot less US dollars for the foreign currency. So that was actually one of the main objections there, main points that Tesla said impacted operating income for the quarter was foreign exchange. Also, higher raw materials costs, right? Higher goods, raw materials costs for the EVs. They also signaled continued issues with supply chain, more specifically when it comes to the semiconductor shortage or the global semiconductor shortage. And we've been talking about this on the stream as well, because if you think about EVs or electric vehicles, there's about twice as many semiconductors or chips that go into an electric vehicle than that go into regular cars. Okay, so Tesla is using about twice the amount of chips. Oh, here's more of them. Very cool. So obviously Tesla has to use a lot of semis for their EV production. Hey, Canyon Overlook says, hey Tom, where is a good place to buy a small retirement condominium in Florida that I could rent out until I retire in 3 to 4 years? Well, so that's a good question, and I would like to warn you, you really, really have to watch the rules and specific regulations of the particular building you're looking at, right? So A lot of times, I'm not going to say all the time, but a lot of times realtors will not disclose that type of information. You have to make sure, the specific HOA, if you have an HOA, they will actually allow you to rent out your unit. A lot of them don't. So definitely check your renter laws. Also, Canyon Overlook, I'm not sure if you're looking into long-term rentals or short-term rentals. If you're looking into short-term rentals, like something like Airbnb or something like that, then you really, really have to check the local laws, rules, regulations about that. So that would be my piece of advice. Just make sure you double check, triple check the laws within your specific municipality. Austin City Limits is here. Welcome. Good to see you. Nirvana Fan 500 says, when are you back home? I'm home now. I'm home now. Dazza Yukez says, hey Tom, I hope you're having a good week. I am having a good week. Having a fantastic week. So I think we'll talk about gross margins for a minute. So if we look at, let me start by saying this. Historically, the business of making cars is really not that, if you look at the history of car companies and manufacturers in the United States, I think Tesla is one of the only car companies who hasn't gone out of business or have filed for bankruptcy at some point, right? And I think that's very important to note that. So one of the reasons or the value propositions that a lot of Tesla investors have seen in Tesla is the higher than average gross margins for their cars, right? And I think there's a couple reasons for that. Number one, I think that Tesla has extreme pricing power in the industry. The reason why I say that is because anytime you talk to a person who owns a Tesla, half of those people are quite literally obsessed, right? They're part of Elon Musk fan groups and things like that. So you have such a crazy loyal fan base that, if you remember correctly, a couple months ago, Tesla actually put out a statement saying that they were going to raise prices. And nobody really balked at the price increases for Tesla, right? Which is a really, really good thing to take into consideration when we know that inflationary pressures are going through the roof, which is not only putting pressure on gross margins on Tesla, but all other auto manufacturers in the United States domestically and across the globe. So automotive gross margin actually came in at about 27.9%. That was down from about 32.9% last quarter and 28.4% a year ago. So slight margin compression here. Obviously, this is not exclusive to Tesla. I remember last quarter we were actually covering Walmart's earnings report and Target's earnings report. And within those reports, the CEO of Target actually came out and said the same thing, that their margins are also compressed due to a backlog of inventory or a pileup of inventory, inflationary pressures, and the fact that Target is having a little bit of a hard time passing on those price increases to consumers. Now, the good news is those are still pretty high gross margins for Tesla, right? If you're in the mid-20s or low 30s in relation to gross margins for your EVs, if you compare that to, let's say, a GM, if you compare that to a Ford or even Volkswagen, their margins tend to come in right around, I don't know, maybe 10 to 15%, if that. But then again, Tesla is not exempt from all of these inflationary pressures, supply chain issues, putting more pressure on gross margins. Hey, Water Blazing is here. Good to see you, Water Blazing. Yeah, Austin City Limits is, I think that Ford hasn't filed for bankruptcy also. It's one of them that hasn't. Iris Luce says most countries are selling U.S. debt. Mona D says, hello, Tom and chat. Good to see you, Mona D. Hopefully you are well. Kathy Lyons is here. Says, thank you. Is excellent. Thank you for being here, Kathy. Hopefully you had a fantastic day today. Sparks Carnival says Tesla stock has posted gains for 6 consecutive trading sessions. Yeah, so Sparks Carnival, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think the price of Tesla shares moved much off the back of this earnings report. Percent after hours, and then it settled back down to about flat. So the reason why I tend to cover or make an entire stream about companies like Tesla, Microsoft, or Alphabet when they report earnings is because if we think about looking at the market from the major indices, right? So the S&P 500 is what's called a market capitalization weighted index. So what that means, the larger the market, the $1 trillion club, those type of stocks, they tend to make up a higher weighting in the index. So for example, let's say if Tesla reported a horrible quarter and after hours, well, there's a very, very good chance that that move in that single particular stock is going to make an impact on the overall indice, right? Because the higher the weighting in the indice, let's say if Tesla makes up 5% of the index, Tesla's down 10% after hours, well, it's going to make a big ding in the overall market and probably bring down multiple indices, not only S&P, but the NASDAQ and the like. Sparks Carnival says Muck said he expects a record second half of 2022. Yeah, he did. I think we're buffering here. Let me know if we're buffering, everybody. Maybe I'll move. Dusty Cole says Tom should be on TV at cable news. PBS is my favorite. Gregory, good to see you. Welcome. Yeah, so let me know if we're buffering, everybody. I think we're going to take a quick walk to FTX Arena. We haven't been over there in a while. Mike says we sound great. Copy that. So we're crossing Northeast 4th Street. And the building all lit up in red is the Freedom Tower. Hey, E-Baby says, good evening, Tom. Good to see you. War Walker, good to see you. Welcome, War Walker. Hopefully you are well. So there's two things that I think, or two main things that we should cover tonight in relation to Tesla's earnings report. Number one, some commentary from the China factory in Shanghai. And number two, the Berlin, Germany factory. So as we know, at an event, I think it was a couple months ago, it was like a Tesla meetup for a lot of the Tesla fanboy clubs that they tend to have in Silicon Valley. Elon Musk said something along the lines of, the two brand new factories, or the newest gigafactories that they opened, one in Austin, Texas, and another one, I believe it was the Shanghai factory. The factory in Germany. Musk said that the new factories in Austin, Texas, and Germany are gigantic money furnaces. So huge money losers, huge money burners, those two factories. However, there was a major milestone that did come out of the Fremont, California factory in Q2. And that milestone was 2 million vehicles produced to date. So that is a huge milestone there for the team at Tesla. But as we go back to those gross margins, talking about the margins, you probably saw additional compression there from the added expenses and the added costs of those 2 brand new factories in Austin, Texas, and in Berlin. Now, I think that's to be expected, right? Anytime there's a new facility, you're trying to ramp up production, you're trying to hire employees, train employees, and the like. It tends to be a money burner at first. But then as you work out the kinks, as you maybe install some automation tools within the factory, the operating expenses tend to drop over time and usually start to ramp up. So the theory is the more cars, the more vehicles you can get out the door and produce in an efficient and timely manner, the more profitable the factory will be, obviously, for obvious reasons. Now, I think, and this is the FTX Arena, by the way, everybody. So we're crossing over the train tracks at the FTX Arena. Maurice says the Freedom Tower. Yeah, so the Freedom Tower is right here. It's one of my favorite buildings in downtown Miami. Michelle K says, good evening, Tom. How are you? I'm doing very good. Jake from Florida is here. Welcome. Hey, Dan Zeng is here. Says, hey, Tom, glad you're not in New York because of the heat wave. How's the temperature in Miami? Dan, what's up? So it's actually not too bad here in Miami. During the day it's a little humid, it's crazy hot, but I think that's to be expected, right? I think that's pretty much to be expected here in Miami. But once the sun goes down, it's pretty much fine. Dan, we were talking about yesterday on the stream, supposedly you guys in New York had like a mini flash flood. Some of the parts, the Bronx specifically, I was watching a video on Twitter, how there was like a massive sinkhole opening and a couple cars fell down in it. So pretty bizarre stuff, but appreciate you joining the stream. We were talking about Tesla. Even though it did have an earnings beat, we did come in a little bit soft on the revenue. Obviously, gross margins are still good, but margin compression does seem to be a problem. But I don't think the stock is down because I think that's to be expected, right? It's not exclusive to Tesla. Almost everybody in the industry is experiencing this. So I think you could bet your bottom dollar that if Tesla is experiencing margin compression, what's going to happen when we have Ford, GM, and all the other auto manufacturers reporting earnings? We're probably going to see the same exact thing, right? And they contributed that to a couple things as we were looking over the one and only Paramount Tower, or the Paramount building here in downtown Miami, which I think has the most amenities in the Northern Hemisphere. I think that's right. I think it's the single building with the most amenities. I think it has multiple swimming pools, all types of crazy stuff. Now, I think Action Kid did a video detailing just everything about this building. So please check that out if you have not, but pretty insane stuff. Yesterday we took a tour, well, not a tour, but a walk past the Aston Martin building, and I think that's all sold out. I think that building is all sold out. Austin City Limits is, you're right, Tom. Yeah, I mean, that has been one of the biggest, bull thesis for these Tesla bulls is that, look, the reason why the company deserves a premium valuation is because margins are just so uncharacteristic for an auto company. But as we talk about profitability, let's talk about operating income for a second. So operating income at Tesla did improve year over year to about $2.5 billion in the second quarter, resulting in about 14.6% operating margin. So if we think about the positives and the negatives, so a lot of times, well, all the time, when a company reports earnings, they'll put out an investor deck. Okay, so they'll put out that investor deck. In the deck, if you guys scroll down, so if you type !Musk, M-U-S-K in the chat, I actually programmed the Nightbot to drop you guys the link to the actual Tesla investor deck. So if you scroll down to operating income or profitability, They said there was a couple things that impacted profitability from a positive standpoint. And the positives were increased average sale price per EV. You know, we talked about that earlier in the stream, how Tesla was actually able to raise prices and demand was not deterred whatsoever. And I think this is also another bonus point for Tesla, because I don't think you could say the same thing about Ford, GM, or any other auto manufacturer. You know, if you're gonna raise prices, it's not like you have any, you know, let's say Ford fanboys or maximalists. But with Tesla you do. You have a lot of crazy people, and I'm not saying that in a bad way, I'm saying that in a good way, that support Tesla, that support the vision, and that are really not affected by price increases. So if you scroll down to the profitability segment, one of the things that impacted operating income from a positive standpoint was increased average sale price of the EVs, growth in EV deliveries overall, and profit growth in other parts of the businesses, including services. Right? So if you think about, many people just think about Tesla as an auto manufacturer, which that obviously is by and large the most revenue generating segment of the business, but they also have an energy part of the business, right? They also have a services part of the business, so when those other segments do well, it tends to have a trickle down effect into the bottom line. So let's actually walk behind the FTX arena and see if we could see any dolphins tonight. You know, usually we tend to get lucky as we take a walk behind the FTX arena. We usually see like a school of dolphins swimming by. It is a beautiful night, so hopefully we'll get lucky again. Hey, Eyeglass Lady is here. It says, good evening, Tom. Eyeglass Lady. Thank you for joining. Hopefully your week is off to a great start. We're headed into the tail end of the week. Already Thursday tomorrow. Already Thursday. Dan Zhang says, hey Tom, did you see the news from last week that the average rent in Manhattan reached $5,000 a month? Yeah, we actually did see that. We talked about that a little bit last night on the stream. Oh, look at this dog. I think the dog wants some water. You know, I actually, well, my dad has two of these dogs. These are German Shepherds. They're absolutely beautiful, absolutely gorgeous. Yeah, so Dan, anyway, sorry, I got distracted by the dogs. But yeah, we did talk about that. I think it's a little bit misleading. So obviously the data is correct. It's not fake news. But I think that for the average person that is looking at something like that, the average person will read that article and say, oh, everybody in New York City pays $5,000 a month for rent. And you and I know that's not true, but I think the way things can get a little bit skewed is because if you're talking about Manhattan specifically, right, in Manhattan, you have Billionaires Row, where some people are spending, you know, $80,000 a month on rent. Then you can go to a place like Washington Heights, Hamilton Heights, parts of East Harlem, where rent is actually quite affordable, you know, depending on the particular neighborhood you're in. So when you average all of that stuff into each other, you know, the crazy parts of the city like Greenwich Village, like Soho, Billionaires Row, really takes an aggressive stance on the pricing that comes out in the headline. So I think maybe the median rent is a little bit more accurate for what actually people are paying. And also, as you know, there's a ton of people that have roommates, right? So yeah, you may pay $5,000 in rent, even though it's a one bedroom, you may share that with two people. But yeah, nonetheless, the rental market is on fire. You know, we were actually covering a couple streams ago. There was an interesting article in, I think it was the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal, I forget which one, but they were actually interviewing some of the top brokers in New York City and, you know, surrounding counties like Nassau and Suffolk, and they're actually seeing some of the irrational buying behavior that we saw in the single family market actually translate over to the rental market. So people are actually in bidding wars for apartments to rent them, which is pretty crazy. So let's say if you have a list price of an apartment at, you know, $8,000 a month, sometimes if the location's right, if multiple people really like the property, they could bid that all the way up to like $13,000 or $14,000. So you're seeing all of this crazy FOMO, or fear of missing out, spill over from the housing market now into the rental market. And we actually got some data out of the housing market, the rental market. I believe it was today that for the first time ever, oh, I think that's a dolphin right here. I think it's right here. Hold on. Keep your eye on this spot right here. For the first time since 2008, or the housing affordability is at an all-time record low. So even worse than the height of the last housing bubble. Kirby says in Manhattan, you don't need a car. Most Americans pay thousands a year on their vehicles. That is true, Kirby. That's also an interesting thing to take into consideration. I think this is one of my favorite views in the city of Miami. You're looking at the beautiful 1000 Museum building, where I believe David Beckham has one of the top floors as a residence. And there's actually a helicopter pad on the top of this floor right here. Ed Go Places says, is that a shark? No, I think they're dolphins. Usually, whenever we walk over here, we tend to see dolphins in this particular area. Dusty Cole says, these rental bidding wars are nationwide, Tom. Awful stuff. Can the government do anything to stem property inflation? Well, I think, Dusty, I think the government really caused the majority of this. I think, right? I don't really want to get too political, but, we actually did an entire stream on this that, well, we didn't predict this was going to happen, but we sort of insinuated this may happen. A lot of the mortgage forbearance or the rental forbearances is going to come around and bite a lot of people because essentially a lot of landlords were stiffed over the COVID pandemic, in which case landlords now are just starting to be able to evict people, and they would rather leave some of their apartments vacant and not budge on the income requirements, not budge on the credit requirements in fear of getting stiffed again. Now, I know that's not probably the main reason, but it definitely is a contributing factor, right? I know many landlords that say, never again, I will never, ever, ever budge on any of the requirements. Here's what I mean. Usually, you need to make 40 times the rent in order to qualify. That's without any sort of guarantor, right? So if you do have somebody that is going to co-sign your lease, then that usually bumps it up to, 80 times the rent. Okay, usually you have to have a 750 or greater credit score, but many people don't have the income requirements or the credit score. Now, it doesn't mean that these people aren't trustworthy. I mean, sometimes quite the opposite. But it's now making landlords not budge, which is essentially creating this two-tier society that if you want to be able to get into a place, you need to have pristine income and pristine credit, and if you're lacking on either or, you're out of luck, which is really, really unfortunate. James is 40 times the rent, like I might ever, says James. Yeah, in Manhattan, that's pretty standard. You usually need to make about 40 times your monthly rent in order to get in there. Kirby says, imagine impressing a date with a closet. Yeah, I mean, many New York City apartments are the size of a closet, quite literally. I would go as far to say the same thing here in Miami, too. Ryan Royal says, hey, Tom and mods, everybody dolphin watching tonight. Yeah, hopefully we'll see some again. Hopefully. We can only hope. Roberts' annual salary must be 40 times the rent. You're exactly correct. Dan Zhang says, I'm moving out of Long Island City this year. My rent is about to go up by at least $500 when my term is up. I got a COVID deal last year. Yeah, I got a COVID deal too. But, I actually put in the contract that I could have re-signed my lease for only a $100 increase, but I actually chose to move out, obviously, because I purchased the property down here. But yeah, I mean, I'm hearing all types of crazy stories, guys. I'm hearing crazy stories of people, $1,000 rental increases. I'm hearing some crazy, crazy stuff. So, best of luck to everybody out there trying to move and trying to figure out their living situations, because it is wild out there. Superman says, should I move to Miami? Well, I think it just depends on what you're trying to accomplish, right? I think that, me personally, I think Miami is a great place to live. But I think it just really depends on what you like. If you like summer all year round, if you like extreme humidity during the summers, and it just depends on what kind of job you have. Usually a lot of people that are here right now, I would say in downtown Miami, usually work in some sort of technology field, usually work in finance, or even have remote work or have their own businesses. Hey, Elliot says, going to Miami next month, can't wait. Awesome, Elliot, can't wait to see you here. Andy S says, my brother is coming to North Carolina from London tomorrow. He is in tech sales as well. Awesome. Fantastic. Fellow SaaS sales. Nirvana fans is not for me then. Humidity is awful. Yeah, I mean, not a lot of people don't like the humidity. Not a lot of people like the humidity. Dusty Cole says 40 times. Wow, the majority of people I know can't make that. Hey, you know, it's interesting. That's pretty standard though in New York, everybody. I mean, maybe we have a lot of people that have joined the stream tonight that aren't from that neck of the woods, but that's pretty standard. You know, your annual salary usually needs to be about 40 times the rent. So if your rent is $2,000, you know, the landlord is going to say, okay, do you make 2,000 times 40 as your annual salary? Obviously, if you have some sort of a cosigner, if you can't do that, you can get a guarantor, but then I think that pushes it up to 80 times. Hey, Mike Addens, to some states there is a law that the rent can only increase by a certain percentage. There's certain laws pertaining to renting that is controlled by the state or sometimes even the city. Yeah, Mike, I think you're right. I think generally you're right. I think for the first time in a very, very long time, a lot of the rent-controlled buildings in New York City actually passed a rental increase. I think it was a little above 3%. Maybe some of the New Yorkers in the chat can fact-check me with this. But I think they increased the rent on some of those rent-controlled buildings about 3%. Iris says that is normal. Everything is super expensive now. I can agree with you there. Paolo says, hey friend, it is a pleasure and always watching your stream. Hey, Paolo, Antonio, appreciate that very much. Thank you for being here. D-Hot says, hey Tom, Jets, Bills, or Fins? Neither. I'm not a big football guy, to be honest. Not a big football guy, but if I had to choose somebody, I'd probably choose the Giants. But then again, not really a big football guy. Not really a big football guy, D-Hot. LETR says, dampness with winter cold is worse than dampness caused by heat. Yeah, I mean, I guess it just all depends on what you like. I mean, I'm not a big winter guy at all. You know, I think we have some heat lightning here, everybody. So if you look in the distance above the bridge, hopefully we'll get a couple cool lightning strikes on the stream. One of the main reasons why I moved to Miami is because the New York City winters are very, very tedious for me. But again, some people like it. I think it all depends on personal preference. You know, I think it's funny, you know, if you go on Twitter or something like that, you know, you'll have these debates. You know, Austin, Texas is the best city in the United States. San Francisco is the best city. New York City is the best city. And then everybody's sort of, you know, dumping on each other, saying, oh, New York City is dirty. New York City is too freezing in the winter. I think it just depends on personal preference. I mean, some people really like it freezing cold, believe it or not. You know, like my brother, he's big into, you know, like snowboarding, all that stuff. I hate that stuff. I can't stand it. But again, it's personal preference. So obviously no snowboarding here, so we're all set. Yeah, Zach says Miami is hot AF. Well, Zach, interesting fact here. I know we're getting a little bit off topic, but I think this is fun. Interesting fact, I do not think ever in the history of Miami it has ever reached triple digits. Okay, so it has reached triple digits in the Northeast, New York, Boston, all those big cities. But in Miami, it's never reached triple digits whatsoever. Okay, everybody, this is the spot where we usually see the dolphins. So hopefully we will spot some tonight. James is in California. You have to pay the tenant's first month's rent somewhere else if you evict them for any reason. Superman says, I'm from New York City too, can't wait to leave. You know, I think my two favorite cities, and I posted this on Twitter, if you guys want to follow at Walks Wall Street, my two favorite cities are New York City and Miami. Again, that's just because of my personal preference. I know everybody else has preference, but I mean, even though I think the politics are so screwy and backwards in New York, I still love the city. Still love the city. So now we are overlooking the Bayside Marketplace. You see the Ferris wheel in the distance. Yeah, Jay says the rent in Miami is high. Rent in Miami is crazy. Rent in Miami is, I would say, not as crazy as New York, but getting there. You know, I don't think we're excluded from all the craziness there. But everybody, we are now looking at the backside of the FTX Arena, the home of the Miami Heat. But I think I just want to do a quick revenue breakdown for Tesla. Obviously, Tesla reported earnings after the bell today. Probably the biggest piece of news on Wall Street, or the most anticipated earnings report of the day and of the quarter, perhaps. So the Q2 revenue breakdown for Tesla. We had about $14.6 billion in revenue coming from the automotive unit, obviously, which is like EV sales and things like that. Number two, we had about $1.47 billion of services revenue, right? So there's a lot of people think about Tesla as just selling cars, right? But there's services and there's also an energy unit. So last but not least, coming in at about $866 million for the quarter was the energy segment. So those are the three main revenue generators for Tesla. So we'll just review that really quick. So automotive sales came in at about $14.6 billion. Services accounted for about $1.47 billion, and coming in just shy of $1 billion at $866 million was the energy segment. Now, on Tesla's earnings conference call, they did say that Russia's invasion of Ukraine and also China's egregious and horrible zero COVID policy exacerbated not only the semiconductor shortage, but the supply chain shortage as well. And the Shanghai factory was actually forced to close down, reopen, and then temporarily suspend production in Q2. So that was all a little bit of negatives coming out of Tesla's earnings report. You know, I was talking with my friend a little bit after the market closed, and we were like, you know what, imagine if the Shanghai factory was actually allowed to not open, close, and actually was able to run at full capacity. That could have made a material impact on this earnings report. So let's see if we have any dolphins here. Keep your eyes peeled. This is usually the spot where we see them. James says, I'd rather live in an environment that is always too cold than one that is always too hot. OT says, what's up, man? Welcome back to Miami. Hey, OT, thank you so much for saying that. I appreciate it. FredX says, hey, Tom, the palm trees are about 50% of Miami's charm. Duta says, hey, Tom, the Wall Street Journal article about how Texas Tech salary gap in comparison to the Bay Area is now about 27% from 40% back in 2019. So I think that's good news for Texas, right? You know, so what does that really say about the Valley? What does that really say about Silicon Valley? What do you think? To me, it means that I think a lot of companies and people are realizing that if you want to be successful in tech and work in tech, you don't necessarily need to be in Silicon Valley. You don't necessarily need to be in San Francisco or in California in general. You know, you could start a successful tech company and prosper and really make a killing, either being a software engineer or an enterprise account executive or an account executive selling SaaS or software as a service. Carson says, did you see their free cash flow? Would have been negative without their Bitcoin sales. Yeah, so Carson, that is a little bit of fake news. I did see that. I don't think that's true. With their Bitcoin, if they didn't sell their Bitcoin, they would still be free cash flow positive. I saw a couple things floating around on Twitter, but when I looked at the investor deck, so Carson, I actually dropped a link to the investor deck. So if you type !Musk, M-U-S-K, in the chat, you'll actually be able to see the entire Tesla investor deck. Right, so I think a lot of people may have, and again, I'm not 100% on this. I looked at it briefly, and in my calculations, they wouldn't have been. So I don't know, sort of what they were looking at. There was a couple people on Twitter spreading that, saying, "Hey, look, the only reason why they sold 75% of their Bitcoin is to be cash flow positive. But the math that I did, that wasn't technically correct, but I did see that floating around on Twitter. It definitely helped, but I saw the same thing too. But I'll have to go back and run the numbers and fact check that as well. Aussie says, hey Tom, why did tech stocks go up today, please? Well, usually I don't think anybody could really predict the day-to-day moves to say, hey, this is the exact reason why stocks go up. A lot of times you'll see on something like CNBC, you'll say, hey, stocks rallied today because of this news and that news. I think that's all kind of nonsense, but if I had to give you an answer, I would say that a lot of these high beta tech stocks, right? So extremely, extremely high turbocharged revenue growth, very little earnings or earnings projected in the future. A lot of these stocks have been beaten down, let's say 70 to 80%. So that creates an opportunity for a short squeeze, right? So a lot of times, well, not a lot of times, if you're going to exit a short position in the market, you actually have to buy to close your position, right? There's a difference between buying to open a position on Wall Street and buying to close a position. I know they sound a little bit weird. Why would you buy a stock to close a position? But if you're naked short selling something, in layman's terms, the definition of shorting a particular security is you're borrowing the shares from your particular broker dealer in hopes that the stock price drops to then buy those shares back that you borrowed at a lower price, and you keep the delta or the difference, right? So, I saw the same thing. You look at a lot of the ARK ETFs, like the ARK, ARKK funds, they seem to be bottoming out here. I think that you can have a pretty decent rally back to, a lot of the 50-day moving averages. If you look at a weekly chart, some of these probably will rally all the way back to their 200-week moving averages. So usually the most ferocious rallies are in a bear market, but there is some good news. The S&P 500 is now well above its 50-day moving average for the first time in a while, so making some progress there. 61, thank you so much for the $5 donation. This is a toast to Miami and New York, two of your favorite cities. Thanks for all your info and knowledge you share with us. Hey, thank you so much, 61. Hopefully you guys are enjoying the sights and sounds of Miami and New York City. They're two of my favorite cities, and I'm more than happy to bring you guys along for the ride. So thank you, 61, for the donation. Much, much appreciated. Dallas is here, says, hey Tom, good evening. How is it? The weather looks beautiful tonight in Miami. It's a beautiful night. It's absolutely beautiful night tonight in Miami. I would agree with you. Dallas, we are talking about Tesla's earnings report tonight. Iris says, from last year, most stock prices are about 30 to 40% off. You're exactly right. So going back to that, right, and in relation to Tesla's earnings report, the headline, I think, the headline for Tesla's earnings report is not what they produced in revenue, is not the EPS, it's the margins, right? It's the gross margins, because if you have to think about all the companies out there, especially tech companies, right? You think about the big tech companies like Microsoft, ServiceNow, Alphabet. Tech companies in general tend to have very, very high margins. Usually the consumer discretionary companies tend to not have very high margins. Automakers tend to have not very high margins either. If you think about other auto manufacturers, let's think about GM, let's think about like a Volkswagen or a Ford, those gross margins tend to be about 12 to 15%, maybe, right? So the most important thing of Tesla's earnings report, and a lot of the thesis of these Tesla bulls here, is that, look, Tesla is, obviously they're innovating in their technology and their EV technology. But the number one thing is they're an automaker and they consistently post 30% gross margins. Think about that. As opposed to, what am I going to get when I buy Ford? I'm going to get 12% margins in relation to 30%. So the automotive gross margins came to about 27.9% in Q2 for Tesla. That is down from 32.9% last quarter and 28.4% a year ago. Okay, so we are seeing some slight margin compression. And if you look at the investor deck that I put in the link in the Nightbot, they'll actually tell you why. They'll tell you why there was some slight compression there. I think we got a dolphin right here. Right here. So we'll just watch that area. Hopefully he'll pop back up. Number one, obviously, is inflationary pressures. You know, if you think about what goes into making an electric vehicle, it takes 2 times the amount of chips or 2 times the amount of semiconductors that go into an EV than that goes into a regular car, right, or a non-EV. So as we think about the supply chain issues, if we think about the zero COVID policy, and just raw materials in general, right, the rare earths and the metals that go into making the batteries, those are all going up. But here's the good news, right, and this is what we talked about, and it is in the investor deck that I put in the description, and that's why I think it's so important to actually read the investor deck and not just read like the CNBC articles, because you could actually see what Tesla as a company is saying. They said that they have pricing power in the industry, which is very, very good. So Tesla just recently raised the price of many of their EVs across the board, and it didn't really dampen demand at all. There was actually more deliverables. I think we did get deliverable numbers last month for Tesla, and I think they delivered over 250,000 cars. So based upon the brand name of Tesla, based upon Elon Musk, how people worship him, the good news is that even though it is costing more to produce an EV, I think that Tesla could probably raise prices and people won't even bat an eye. Also, if you look at the data of the amount of income an average person who buys a Tesla makes, it's right at around $150,000. Did anybody know that? So the average income of somebody who purchases a Tesla is right around $150,000 household income. So they can afford to pay $2,000 or $3,000 more on the cost of the car. So I think that is definitely a point to note there. Joan is here. Good to see you, Joan. Sunshine After Rain says the Chevy electric is the Blazer. Oh, the Chevy electric Blazer. Thoughts? I mean, I don't know. So Sunshine After Rain, I think that's a good question. So let's actually take a little bit of a poll in the chat. Bono Sonic says Tesla will be fine. German car makers could only dream of profit margins like that. Yeah, that's a good point. Even when Tesla is at what is considered the low end of its own standards. Yeah, so Bono, exactly. So what Bono's comment just was is exactly what we were just talking about, right? So one of the biggest bull theses for Tesla investors is, hey, Ford, GM, and all these other automakers could only dream of 30% gross margins. Tesla does that on a bad quarter, right? I mean, obviously this quarter, their gross margins was about 28%, but I think that's a little bit of an anomaly. I think we could all agree, right? I mean, CPI is running at about 9.1%. Inflationary pressures are going gangbusters. Their Shanghai factory was shut down almost the entire quarter, and they still maintained on the high end of 20% gross margins. I think that's pretty good. Bob says there are other EVs that aren't as expensive as Teslas. Absolutely. I would say that Tesla is right at about the premium level of EVs. But let's take a poll in the chat, right? Because I think this is going to be good. There's a lot of people here, that drive too. So out of everybody in the chat, if you were going to buy an EV, would you buy a Tesla or would you buy it from, let's say, Ford, like the new Ford Mustang that is now an EV, right? Or would you buy an electric Volkswagen or something like that? So let's take a little bit of a poll in the chat. What do you guys think? Would you, if you were in the market for an EV, would you buy a Tesla? What do you think? Hey, EBITDA says, I have a Tesla and would get another. Wow, EBITDA, good to see you. Solo says Tesla. Frank Gonzalez says, Tom, hello and stay safe. Thank you so much. Okay, everybody's saying EV. Bob says no. Okay. Jordan says VW EV or a Honda EV. Okay. LETR says no, I won't buy it. Interesting. Bernard Friedman says I definitely buy a Tesla. Dusty says I can't afford a Tesla. 61 says yes. Heather says whatever is the cheapest and has the best reviews. Okay. Bono says Tom, a Tesla, it's not even a question. I respect that. Antonio says I'm not a fan of Tesla, I prefer a Porsche. So an electric Porsche, okay. Those probably run in the hundreds of thousands, right? Okay, Ryan Royal says GM EV. Okay, so a little bit different than I actually expected. So maybe I have a little bit of confirmation bias or a cognitive bias here. I thought the entire chat was going to be Tesla. So this is actually pretty interesting. Rusty says Subaru, a new EV Subaru. Okay, Charlie Richardson says I'd get a Tesla because of the tech. Michael Johnson says Hellcat truck supercharged. Funny. Okay, so yeah, I mean, it looks like the competition for Tesla is growing. I'll give you guys my answer. I mean, you guys know I'm not a big car guy, right? I don't have a car. Very seldom do I drive. But I think as I get older, my first car will probably be a Tesla. I think my first car will probably be a Tesla. And I think by the time that I come around to actually purchasing an EV, the range on the Teslas are probably going to be crazy. I'll probably be able to drive, from Florida. I'll probably be able to drive the trip from Florida to New York in maybe about less than 10 stops to charge. What do you guys think? I think that's reasonable to say. Mr. Braden says, how old are you? I just turned 27, so 27 years old. Ryan Royal says, I just don't know enough about Tesla cars in general, if the price is worth it, etc. Fair. Michelle K says, Tom, I'd always have a Ford. Okay, very loyal to Ford. I get it. If we want to talk about the administration, right? So a lot of times the Biden administration will like to, harp on, or not really harp, let me take that back. They'll like to point out companies that are doing a lot for, let's say, climate change. Okay. And very seldom does the Biden administration like to recognize Tesla as doing things to accelerate the fight against climate change. But they are always quick to point out like GM and the like. And I think that's probably because the vast majority of those workers are union workers, as opposed to Tesla, which does not have union workers. But I think recently Biden was pressured to acknowledge that Elon Musk and Tesla is doing a good job to, obviously accelerate the fight against climate change, which I think is only fair, right? I mean, they are the largest EV manufacturer. Austin City Limits says, I'm a Ford man. Dallas says, Tom, I personally would, but a Tesla due to its quality and it's a great company. JR says, you may not drive, but your shuttle and deliveries will be EVs. So RJ, that's actually a fantastic point. That's actually a fantastic point, which actually, leads me to my last sort of point of topic I was going to talk about Tesla, is that I think that the vast majority, as we move into the age of automation and autonomous driving, I think you're going to see a lot of Tesla sales to big corporations. This is one of the predictions I have. Now, again, this isn't fact. This is just one of my predictions. I think you're going to see big manufacturing companies, big box retailers, consumer discretionary companies, let's say like a Target, a Walmart or something like that, maybe even Amazon. But maybe Amazon probably won't purchase Teslas because they do already have sizable investments in other EV companies, Lucid Motors and the like. But I think in the next 20 years, you're going to see big purchase orders for EVs with the capability of full autonomy. Now, we've talked about some of the reasons why I think we're a little bit a ways away from full autonomy. And I think the number one reason is because we do not have true defined stable 5G networks, right? So if you want to think about an autonomous car, you're going to need a network that is very low latency and high throughput, right? And I think in select cities, so you may be in downtown Manhattan, or you may be in downtown Miami or Austin or Seattle or whatever big city you're in, you'll probably get those requirements in terms of the latency requirements, very, very low latency, high throughput networks. But what about in more rural areas of the United States? There's no way you're going to get that. And this is why that I've been a little bit more bullish on full autonomy in places like Korea, very, very small country, very, very condensed and compact, a little bit easier to build out a true traditional 5G network that'll be able to provide those speed requirements, latency requirements for EVs. So I think, even though I'm optimistic on that, I'm optimistic on 5G networks in localized places. So you'll probably have localized places within Manhattan, within Brooklyn, within parts of Silicon Valley that will be able to, deliver you a pizza in a fully autonomous EV. That's sort of what I think. Iris loses 20 more years in the USA, maybe. Dan Zhang says Tesla really needs to improve the quality of its interior because luxury German car companies like Mercedes and Audi are catching up with the amazing interior. Dan, I've heard some complaints also about the body of the car. Now, again, I don't have a Tesla, so, don't grill me in the comments section, but from people I know who have Teslas, they're reporting, very, I should say, shiesty or shafty quality of the production of the car. So, you'll have when the door closes, it won't match up perfectly, or some of the sealants will come undone, or some of the paint will come chipped or scratched or things like that. But I think that's all a work in progress, but I've heard some similar objections too. Samus64 says people who have Tesla will always say it's the best car ever. Yeah, so Samus64, that's exactly what I was saying, right? I have never, and these are the type of companies I usually invest in. I will admit I totally missed the boat on buying Tesla. I haven't made a dime on Tesla stock. I've sort of stayed away from it, mainly due to profitability issues. But I guess technically that's not true because I own, Tesla through index funds. But I don't own the stock outright. Let's just say that. But the point I'm trying to make is when I'm building an investing thesis for an individual stock, okay, I like to invest in companies. Obviously, you guys know the criteria we like to look for. We like to look for at least 25% plus quarter over quarter EPS or earnings per share growth. We like to look for 25% plus quarter over quarter revenue growth, very high pre-tax and after-tax margins, at least 25% return on equity. And usually we like to look for a company that is selling a product that addresses a huge TAM or total addressable market, right? So the bigger the vertical, the bigger the land grab, the more revenue runway, the more profitability runway, and the like. But lastly is I like to look for companies that are selling products or services that people are obsessed with to the point of it's a cult, right? And for example, I forgot who said that, but maybe it was Samus64. Every time you talk to somebody who owns a Tesla, these people are nuts. They're obsessed with the company. They're obsessed with Elon Musk. They're obsessed with the vision, right? It's sort of the same thing, with the company in the early innings of Starbucks, right? Like a cult loyalist fan base. And those are the type of businesses you want to invest in. It's sort of and I think you can a little bit attest to the same thing with people that are Bitcoin maximalists, right? These people are obsessed with Bitcoin. They'll accumulate Bitcoin. They'll never sell their Bitcoin because they are absolutely bought in, head over heels obsessed. So, if anybody read Peter Lynch's book, Peter Lynch came out with a phenomenal book. It's honestly probably one of the best books on investing ever written. It's called One Up on Wall Street. And he actually outlines this exact concept. right? You want to look for a business that sells a product or service that customers are so obsessed with. And I think Tesla checks that box. I think Tesla absolutely checks that box. Yeah, infinite skies, the same with Apple. That's, hey, very good observation. Very good observation. The same exact thing with Apple. You're 100% right. 100% right. It's almost like a cult following. Dan Zhang says, Tom, you're so right about the cult. My friend posts an IG story of her Tesla every day. Yeah, and I mean, look, I think that, if we want to talk about, marketing, right, what percentage of revenue do you think Tesla spends on marketing? Now, this may be a little bit of a trick question, but I think many of you guys are sharp enough to get this. This is an absolutely adorable dog. But what percentage of revenue do you think Tesla spends on marketing? Practically nothing, right? The CMO or the chief marketing officer of Tesla is Elon Musk, right? So I think that's another thing that's very unique about Tesla is that they don't have to spend a lot of money on marketing because without Elon Musk, there would be no Tesla. I think the brand would be tarnished. I think it's synonymous. If you think about Tesla, you think Elon Musk. Like, that's the first person who pops into your brain. So as long as Elon Musk has a Twitter account and is cranking out memes and, going on podcasts like Joe Rogan's podcast or many other podcasts, Lex Friedman, I think you're going to continue to see a very, very tight synonymous correlation between Elon Musk and Tesla. And a lot of companies can't say the same thing. Yeah, Roberts is the press markets Tesla for free. That's true. That's extremely true. One of my good buddies who runs a hedge fund out of Chicago, he also gave me this very interesting piece of advice that I think is played out time and time again. He said that throughout his investing career, by far the individual stocks or the asset classes that have performed the best throughout history is, get this, are particular stocks or asset classes that have two polarizing extremes. Okay, so let me say that again. Usually the stocks, the asset classes or whatnot, whatever you want to call it, that tend to perform the best usually have two polarizing extremes. From the bullish side, you'll have people that are so bullish on this thing that these people, you talk to them and it's almost like they're delusional. Like, it's almost like you're talking to this person about Tesla, you're talking to them about Bitcoin, and it's almost like they come off as delusional. They are so obsessed. And on the other end, when you talk to people, let's say about like a Tesla or a Bitcoin or something, they'll take such a polar opposite of that opinion that you just heard. You'll say Elon Musk is a fraudster, Elon Musk is a scam, Tesla's never going to work, it's going to go bankrupt, Tesla Q, I want to short Tesla. And the same thing with Bitcoin. They'll say Bitcoin is a total scam, it's a Ponzi scheme, it's going to go to zero, like the Peter Schiffs of the world, right? And I thought it was really interesting. I never thought about that before, but I really respect this guy a lot. He runs a hedge fund out of Chicago. Maybe I'll actually have him on the show one night. But he said throughout his entire investing career, whenever he started, he started his career on Wall Street working at Morgan Stanley as a stockbroker. And he said time and time again, the same thing plays out. The investments that absolutely go to Mars are the ones that have two polarizing extremes on either end, right? So people, the bulls won't just be a little bit bullish. You'll never meet somebody that'll be like, yeah, I'm a little bit bullish on Tesla. It's either you're all in and these people are nuts, or it's the thing's a complete scam. And as you look throughout history, and if you think about it, he's kind of right. So what do you guys think about that? Yeah, Jones says the streets are looking clean. I think back there, everybody, if you look online, there's going to be a totally new development where they're getting rid of the elevated sidewalks here in downtown Miami. So the sidewalks will be completely street level. I'm not sure why they're doing that, but I actually think it looks a little bit better. So as you see here, The sidewalks will obviously be up on a curb like you see in New York City. Pretty soon they are going to make the sidewalks level with the street. Maybe it's more aesthetically pleasing, I'm not sure, but Lena Sandoval is here. Good to see you, Lena. Welcome. D-Hot says, Tom, you're young in Southern Florida. Go for the gold treasures of the Keys while you're here. We need new Mel Fisher, says D-Hot. JR says it's to promote high water. Dan Zhang says, does the earnings report today mention anything about the Cybertruck? I think there was a couple comments in there. So Dan, if you type exclamation point Musk, M-U-S-K in the chat, I actually programmed the Nightbot to drop the investor deck. I think it mentioned it a little bit, but mainly the stuff that they harped on was the Shanghai factory. So I'll actually read you guys a real-time excerpt of the investor deck when it relates to the Shanghai factory in China, as well as the Gigafactory in Berlin, Germany. So, and I quote, it says, while the Shanghai factory was shut down fully and then partially for the majority of Q2, we, Tesla, ended the quarter with a record monthly production level out of the factory in Shanghai. Recent equipment upgrades will enable us to increase our production rate further, probably talking about, automating different processes, robotics in the factory. But think about that for a second, everybody. I thought that was actually a bright spot from the earnings report. And here's why I say that. Take a look at the Miami Tower here. So, we've almost talked about this zero COVID policy thing on the stream ad nauseum. So with the earnings report Tesla had, they still were able to maintain those gross margins of about 28% on their cars, while having to deal with the regulatory nightmare coming out of China, mandatory lockdowns, mandatory shutdowns. So they really weren't even able to run the factory at full capacity in Shanghai, and they still were able to report a record monthly production level out of the factory in Shanghai. So could you just imagine, now that everything is opening back up in China, those factories are going to be crushing out vehicles. Could you imagine the amount of increased output they can have just if we solve that one issue? Hopefully, China will no longer require those egregious shutdowns and lockdowns. If we look at Berlin, so if you guys are following along on the investor deck, if you look at Giga Berlin, it says, thanks to strong production rate improvements towards the end of Q2, our team produced more than 1,000 Model Y vehicles in a single week. Okay, so obviously Elon Musk and his team gave signals over the coming, I would say over the past few months, that the new factories in Austin, Texas, and I think the other one in Germany are quote-unquote gigantic money furnaces. But as production ramps up, as they work through the kinks, I think those factories will then in turn turn profitable. So we will keep our eye on that. Gregory says, well, I've warmed up to him, I guess. Not for everybody, to be sure. Michael Johnson says, when I did work for Regional Investment Brokers Syndicate, we would see polar opposites on IPOs. This is Michael Johnson. So in relation to what? In relation to the performance of the IPOs? So Michael, I'm going to recommend a really, really good book. So check out this book. I think you're going to like it. If you worked on IPOs, you're going to absolutely love this book. It is called The Life Cycle Trade by Kathy Donnelly and Eve Bobach. So Eve Bobach actually used to work at the Federal Reserve, but now she is a trader at Ropel Capital Management under James Ropel, good friend of mine. Big shout out to Jim Ropel from Ropel Capital Management. So they manage about $150 million, I think, out of Chicago, and they actually put on the largest study ever of initial public offerings in relation to price performance. So what their data found is that within the first year of IPO, you should almost never buy a new initial public offering, because about 90% of IPOs will undercut their initial list price within the first year. And the theory behind that is because they say every sort of IPO or initial public offering goes through what's called the life cycle trade, where obviously when a company becomes public, different investment banks will then assign analysts to those companies, and assuming that they don't hit the appropriate analyst expectations, the stock will either get downgraded and the like. So usually for an institution to allocate capital towards a new issue, right? So let's say if you're BlackRock, you're running a mutual fund, they'll assign an analyst to a particular stock. They usually want to wait until 3 to 4 earnings cycles roll through to make sure that that particular company is not only beating analyst expectations, but also raising forward guidance. Because there's a lot of times when companies will go public and then they'll just totally crap the bed on future earnings reports. So a lot of the times when you're pitching IPOs around, a lot of the times they'll be overzealous, sometimes fraudulent in the projections of the earnings and the revenues. So a lot of the times the IPOs really need to prove themselves before they get that institutional sponsorship. So before institutions start to accumulate those shares, they want to make sure that the company is not only beating analyst expectations on an EPS standpoint, on a revenue standpoint, but that they are also raising their forward guidance for the full fiscal year and the like. So it's an interesting book. I think you should check it out. I think you're going to like it. It's called The Life Cycle Trade by Yves Bobach. Fade F says, are palm trees native to Florida? I think they are. Brian says, Tom, what is the book name again? So it's called The Life Cycle Trade. So if you want, it's on my Twitter feed. So if you follow me at Walks Wall Street, essentially the authors of the book is Kathy Donnelly and Yves Bobach. And it was the largest study ever done of initial public offerings. And if you guys want to learn, it goes into very, very granular detail and teaches you, like at face value, what is an initial public offering, right? It is essentially the transfer of the ownership of the company from the private market to the public market, right? So if you think about, VC, private equity guys, it is the transfer of ownership from the founders of the company to the public. So that could be anybody from hedge funds, other institutions, retail traders and investors like you and me. So it takes time for those shares to change hands. And that's why usually when companies go public at first, you'll either have this euphoric rise and then a crazy crash of about 50 to 60%, in which case if the company is blowing out their earnings and raising forward guidance, a lot of analysts on Wall Street will then go to their portfolio managers, their PMs, and say, hey, this stock is growing their earnings per share at 25% per annum. They're growing their revenues at 60%. They have 25% return on equity. This is a fantastic business. They're growing their total addressable market. I think we should make an investment, right? And that's when you see all the Fidelities get in there. That's when you see the BlackRocks get in there and all those big institutions that really are called the composite operators in the market. If anybody is familiar with Richard Wyckoff and his theory about the composite operators in the market. Charles says, the future of the so-called green energy is very obscure. First solar panels, it was reported yesterday that they only have a lifespan of 25 years. Afterwards, they have to be replaced. Interesting. Yeah, we were talking about that a little bit yesterday in relation to like wind farms and things like that. How I think we're being a little bit premature in shutting down a lot of the nuclear power plants and all that stuff. So I think I would agree with you. Hey, NMB045 is here. It says, hey Tom, hope you're well. Good to see you. So if you guys are enjoying tonight's stream, feel free to leave a like on the video. Tap the like button and subscribe to the channel if you are new. We usually do these live streams about 5 days per week between New York City and Miami, so we would love to have you join us. So in conclusion, everybody, tonight's topic of the stream was Tesla. We were talking about the earnings report that just came out from Tesla on an EPS or earnings per share basis. Tesla actually beat on the bottom line, reporting $2.27 of EPS versus $1.81 expected. They did come up a little bit short on the revenue side, so about $16.93 billion of revenue versus about $17.1 billion expected. Obviously, the number one thing that we were looking for this earnings report was the gross margins. Tesla reported about 27.9% gross margins. That is down from 32.9% last quarter and 28.4% a year ago. So obviously this isn't exclusive to Tesla in terms of the margin compression we're seeing across the board due to inflationary pressures. And most notably, we did hear from Bill McDermott, the CEO of ServiceNow, coming out and saying that foreign exchange rates are putting a big hurt on profitability. Tesla's seeing the same thing. So if any company out there sells products in other countries, the currency pairs are really hurting a lot of businesses now. The US dollar in comparison to other emerging market currencies is just unbelievable. I don't think we've ever seen this US dollar strength ever in history. And now, I think the euro actually broke parity with the dollar for the first time in 20 years. So now, I think it's about 99 cents to the dollar. I think we actually broke parity for a little bit. Hey, British Cray is here. Good to see you, yeah. British Cray. Hopefully you are doing well. Thank you for joining us tonight. Yeah, Bonos is stating that. Yeah, so the US dollar reaching parity with the euro, really wild stuff, really wild swings in the currency market. And we talked about some reasons why, mainly in relation to the Japanese yen. Okay, so if we want to talk about monetary policy globally, oftentimes on the stream we'll talk about monetary policy here in the United States with the Federal Reserve. But you're seeing very stark contrast here, okay, from the European Central Bank, from the Bank of Canada, from the Federal Reserve, when everybody is resorting to raising interest rates and even quantitative tightening. We're seeing the polar opposite happen in Japan. And I think that's why you're seeing the yen get absolutely crushed here, falling off a cliff. The Bank of Japan actually came out and said they are not going to be raising interest rates. They are going to continue their policy of actually negative interest rates in Japan and continue to print money. And I think that's why you're seeing severe declines in the currency. So even after all of the crazy COVID stimulus, after all of the money that the Federal Reserve printed, the US dollar is still the most attractive person at the party, which is quite strange. Bagels and Walks, is any skateboard videos coming? Yes, we actually will have some skateboard videos coming out pretty soon. Mode Charlie says that's the Icon Brickle. This is, which also shares a parking garage with the Icon or the W Hotel, I believe, which is also a very nice facility. Christopher says it's refreshing to follow Wall Street themed live streams recorded in a tourist hotspot in Miami. Thank you so much, Christopher. LETRs has always been the most attractive person. Iris says Japan is holding the most U.S. debt. Yeah, and I think China is offloading U.S. debt. But I think that's a topic for another night. War Walkers like Miami Vice, good to see you. Arnold says, hey Tom, thank you for the good vibes. Good to see you, Arnold. Always a pleasure. So this is the Icon Brickell and the W Hotel. You know, I was actually walking past the lobby today. I've never been in the lobby, but during the day you could actually see into the windows, and it's unbelievable. It's really, really unbelievable, the lobby here. Nako says, Tom, you have to go enjoy the coconut for the heat. Well, I have some coconuts growing in my backyard, so that's always good. Hey, Bono says, this place looks absolutely fabulous. It is. Yeah, I'll give you guys a quick view of the entire parking garage here. Hey, Chris is here. Good to see you, Chris. Says, hey, Tom. Welcome, Chris. LETR says, hey Tom, how long have you been living in Miami? So I think I've been here for about a year now. I think it's coming up on a year. Time definitely does fly. I can't believe it's almost been a year already, but I tend to spend the vast majority of my time split 50-50 between New York City and Miami. So we'll tend to do these live streams about 5 days a week. Half the time you'll see us streaming live from Miami, Florida, and then half the time you'll see us live streaming from either Midtown Manhattan, usually 57th Street is usually where we start. Kirby says the American public holds the most, over 22 trillion of the national debt. Sally is here, says, hey Tom, beautiful view. Good to see you, Sally. Andy S says, you don't really have coconuts in your backyard. I actually do. I have a coconut tree, I have a mango tree, so all fresh stuff. Hey, Steve says, car of choice, what would you buy? Yeah, so Steve, I'm not really a big car guy, to be honest. I'm not really a big car guy, but if I had to choose, maybe in about 5 years, I'll probably get one. I'll probably buy a Tesla. Which I think is very fitting because Tesla did report earnings today. They did beat on the bottom line, missed on the revenue a little bit. So if you look across the water, everybody, this is actually Brickell Key. Very, very nice place. It has the Mandarin Oriental on the south side of Brickell Key. If you think the name is familiar, it is. The Mandarin Oriental is also in the Deutsche Bank Towers, formerly actually called the Time Warner Center. Manhattan, which we go past all the time. Future endeavors like Tom is going to start selling coconuts curbside. We will. Trust fund owns a significant portion of the U.S. national debt. Roy S. says, Tom, does the same cat still come to your house regularly? Yeah, so it's interesting. There's a ton of stray cats in Miami, like a ton. A ton of stray cats. I'm not sure what the reasoning for that is, but there are a ton of strays nonetheless. But everybody, I just want to review something really quick for the people who are just joining us. So let's talk about profitability for a minute, because that's really all anybody cares about. So if you type !Musk, M-U-S-K in the chat, you will see the actual investor deck that was presented today on the Q2 earnings report. And if you want to scroll down to the profitability section, it'll bring us to operating income. So operating income improved year over year to about $2.5 billion in Q2, resulting in a 14.6% operating margin. So what impacted the positive, or what were some of the positive impacts of this quarter and some of the negative impacts? So some of the impacts that were positive from the quarter were, number one, increased average sale price. So as we know, Tesla actually announced that they are increasing the cost of their EVs. Growth in EV deliveries, profit growth in other parts of the business, and also lower stock-based compensation. Well, let's check out this mariachi band here. Steve says, do you think the housing market is going to go down because I'd love to buy a condo in Miami? Steve, I think select markets will actually go down. So if we use previous price declines as a guide to future, and I know that we're really not supposed to do that, usually the markets that went up the most or that were quote unquote the hottest usually tend to cool down a bit. But tomorrow, if you guys want to join us again back here 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, tomorrow's stream will actually be all about the housing market, more specifically the rental real estate market in relation to multifamily. Okay, I wanted to do an in-depth stream. I'm also going to be getting some real concrete data from one of my friends that owns quite the hefty multifamily real estate portfolio. And we are going to be doing a deep dive into some of the renewal rates. Whoa, guys, check out these stingrays, man. These things are amazing. So I'm not sure if you guys could see them, but these are two massive stingrays right here. But I think it's too dark, unfortunately. Can you guys see that? Oh man, that's a shame. But yeah, tomorrow's stream is going to be all about rental real estate. But I think things will cool down. I think things will cool down a bit. Yeah, Sparks Carmel says the Federal Reserve has their meeting next Wednesday. I also think Apple is reporting earnings next Wednesday too. So that's going to be interesting to see. Yeah, Jared Covey says it's too dark. Yeah, it's unfortunate. But some of the things that negatively impact profitability, obviously higher raw materials costs and commodity costs, higher logistics costs, so 3PL costs, higher per unit fixed costs due to shutdowns in Shanghai, and also the FX impacts, and also the Bitcoin losses. Obviously, they did sell about 75% of their stake in Bitcoin. But I think overall we can pretty much generalize that the number one, I guess you could say, deterrent or thing that impacted the earnings mostly was obviously inflationary pressures, pinching those profit margins a little bit, and obviously that zero COVID policy in China is starting to impact manufacturing capacity at that plant in Shanghai. Travel says beautiful restaurant. Don Smith says New York City dropped charges on Jose Alba. D Hot says, are you buying Bitcoin? I actually did buy Bitcoin right at the 200-week moving average. But again, anytime I buy or sell something that is not an endorsement for anybody watching the stream to do anything, usually the point of the stream is to just, give the latest news in the financial markets, go over, do deep dives in earnings reports. We do not recommend or sort of talk about individual investments, but I did buy some more actually. Yeah, James says, Tom, the Berlin plant isn't helping the matter for Tesla either. Well, I think some good news for that is even though the Austin plant and the Berlin plant are quote unquote cash cows, I think over time as they streamline operational efficiencies, profitability will follow. So as they get up to capacity, or at least full capacity, I think a lot of that cash burn will dissipate or go down, in my view. Oh my gosh, guys, we've already been streaming for an hour and 40 minutes. I got to head back to the bus. I got to get the bus home. But I'll take you guys over the bridge and then we'll call it a night. Steve says, military vet, just trying to live out there. I love your streams. Hey, Steve, well, thank you so much. For your service, number one. First and foremost, appreciate your service to this country and thank you for watching the streams. Much appreciated. But Steve, if you want a more in-depth look, we're going to cover the whole rental real estate market tomorrow, my thoughts on it. But things are crazy. As we talked about a little bit earlier today on the stream, we're starting to see the housing market cool down significantly. So existing home sales are starting to fall off a cliff and roll over here. Obviously, that's probably due to the increased cost of capital, right? So if the Federal Reserve is raising interest rates, if we have a 10-year U.S. Treasury yield above 3%, well, that means mortgage rates are going to start pushing 5.5% to 6%. That's a 100% move year over year, right? Those are massive, massive moves in the bond market. Don't think about that. So if you're going to buy a $400,000 house, your payment quite literally went up 100%, which is wild. Yeah, Dolly Girl Twins is here. Good to see you, Dolly Girl Twins. This is interest rates, agreed. QBiz has gotten late, but I know this was another great stream. Thanks, Tom. Thank you, QBiz. Appreciate it. Yeah, QBiz, tonight was Tesla night. We talked about Tesla exclusively. Yeah, so if you guys enjoyed the stream tonight, feel free to leave a like on the video. Also, subscribe to the channel if you are new. We do these live streams about 5 times per week between Miami, Florida, and New York City as we analyze the financial markets on the stream while we walk around. So we'd love to have you back for another stream. XOXX Bob, thank you for joining. Sabrina Fair, QBiz, Dusty Cole. Hey, Lou72 is here. Good evening. Lou72, always a pleasure to have you here on the stream. Lou72 is expensive replacement for the batteries in the Teslas. Perry Willicks says the cost of a new car is outrageous. Yeah, and I think now the average price or the average cost of monthly payments for new cars have reached $650. So think about that. People who are buying a new car, on average, they're paying $650 a month on a car payment. I mean, to me, that's just insanity. Hey, Out and About from Toronto, Canada. Appreciate it. Well, speaking of interest rates, the Bank of Canada hiked interest rates by 100 basis points, or about 1%. And I think that's going to force the Federal Reserve to probably follow in its footsteps. I don't know if we'll actually get a full 1 percentage point hike, 100 basis points, but we're probably going to get another 75 basis point rate hike, especially because we had the highest CPI print in 40 years. CPI is running at about 9.1%. But I think the only room for optimism that we have now is that commodities prices are starting to roll over. So that should trickle down and show up in the CPI reports maybe over the next coming months. But as of now, the Federal Reserve is going to have to really focus in on that 9.1% number. LETR says, Tom, do you know the current job openings for web developers in Miami? You know, join our Discord. If you look in the links in the description, sign up for the Discord, get in there. Also subscribe to the Behind the Street newsletter, or shoot me an email, and I'll put you in touch with some people. You know, Miami is hiring. There are a lot of job openings here for software engineers, also software salespeople too, or tech salespeople. So more than happy to help anybody out. So that is my field of work. For those of you who don't know, I work in tech sales, so more than happy to help anybody out, get a job, provide referrals or anything like that. So join us in the Discord or sign up for the newsletter. I believe if you type !news, NEWS, in the chat, the Nightbot will drop the link to the Behind the Street newsletter, where I write about the U.S. equity market, emerging markets, fixed income, real estate, so you can stay up to date with us on that. But over the next month or so, everybody, we are going to have some quite large updates for the channel. We will have our own dedicated website where we'll have, different segments of, I guess you can consider, the Walks to Wall Street ecosystem. So a lot of big things coming for the channel. Also, I'm working with a friend who also may leave his job at Google. We're going to try to start through this channel a tech recruiting company. So specialized placement of people who are interested in getting software development jobs, account executive jobs. We are thinking about starting a very niche, specific, and boutique-based recruitment firm, because obviously I have ample experience selling software, enterprise grade, selling tech, telecom. So we know what to look for in candidates to place them into specific companies. So I think what better funnel than the stream, right? A lot of the times on the stream we attract people that are existing software engineers or who are just graduating college who want to break into tech or investment banking. So stay tuned for that. All of that is coming. Also, potential, as we move forward, want to get into some real estate advisory deals. But I think first we may need to start small off into the residential space. But obviously, long term, want to get into big M&A real estate. So a lot of big stuff coming. We will definitely keep you guys posted. Steve says, truthfully, Miami or New York, which do you like better? So I could tell you with conclusivity that my two favorite cities in the United States by far is number one, New York City, number two, Miami, Florida, by far. But again, that's just for me. And I think the reason why I chose Miami, I think this guy, he's an Uber. I think the reason why I chose Miami over other cities to have a second city to live in and work in is because the New York City winters can be really tedious and really hard. Let's just put it that way. So I think as I grow a presence in tech, I think you need to have at least a little bit of a presence here in Miami. This is where a lot of venture capital is moving, private equity, and that's sort of where I want to get involved long term. So I think from a business standpoint, obviously Southern Florida in general is very lucrative in terms of no state income tax. I think that was very enticing for me from spending 7 years in New York City selling tech and paying ridiculous amount in taxes. So I think the business-friendly environment is very good for attracting capital. Obviously, we were talking about Citadel Securities moving their entire firm here to Miami, Florida. But we'll pick up on this conversation later, everybody, because it's running on an hour and 50 minutes, and I gotta run. But everybody, thank you so much for joining tonight's stream. I really mean that. Thank you so much. I look forward to doing these streams every night. We meet a ton of cool people. I love interacting with everybody in the chat. So I want to say thank you, everybody. Really thank you. So to the Mighty Bull, have a good night wherever you are, because there is always a bull market somewhere, and you just need to know where to look. Sabrina Fair, thank you. Loose72, D-Hot, Kathy Lyons. Photos from around New York, Ethan G, Brian Flores, James, Dusty, Q-Biz, appreciate it. Antonio, Steve, Troon, Sunshine After Rain, Nicole. Everybody, we'll see you right back here, Ryan Royal, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We'll see you next time, everybody. Be safe, finish the week strong, and we'll see you right back here, 8:30 Eastern Standard Time tomorrow.